Hey, Michael J.
So, among other things, we got potentially a big Modern tournament coming up this week at the Star City Invitational in Roanoke.
Meow.
Yeah, so this is for purely selfish reasons. I'd love to go over some of the Modern stuff and, get your take on the metagame.
Absolutely. There's a bunch of sweet stuff to talk about in Modern this week. And it's, it's going to be relevant for a variety of different events coming up. But the Invitational is definitely no joke.
Yeah, so I think the last time we talked about Modern, like the real big, super successful decks that were doing well in Modern were Humans, that awesome kind of 11 out of 10 Humans deck where everything is creatures and Aether Vial, and Storm combo. But if you check out the results from the Baltimore Open, which was just a week or so back, a team event, I don't think any of the decks in the top 8 of that event were either of those archetypes. There was
Blue-Red Storm.
You're
Blue
right.
Red Storm, Blue-Red Storm was the finalist. Yeah,
but there is a good spread here. But just on population basis. What about starting with Ali Aintrazi's Grixis Control deck? Because we're like 3 or 4 Grixis Control decks in that top.
No. Aintrazi played Jeskai. They were all Jeskai decks, right?
Yes, they were Jeskai decks. I can't believe I'm looking at the screen saying the word Grixis as I read the word Jeskai. Jeskai Control decks is correct, Patrick.
Yeah, I mean, there was a huge surge, and not just in the top 8. Jeskai Control was the most successful archetype of the weekend, and its results went all the way down. And this was in no small part thanks to Search for Azcanta. Search for Azcanta, which Ali used 3 copies of, has, at least at the moment, appeared to... it's showing up in a few different places, but without question, it would seem the most popular home for it and successful home for it is a new take on Jeskai Control.
So this is kind of a grinding Jeskai Control deck, right? It's got a bunch of cards like Desolate Lighthouse and Field of Ruin to go along with those Search for Azcantas. Ali's deck's got like a Think Twice, Secure the Wastes.
Well, so actually, hold on. Let's not gloss over the Secure the Waste. Secure the Waste is very important, and in fact, you're going to see it throughout. Basically, everybody playing Jeskai is going to have at least 1 copy of Secure the Waste. And that's because this deck is very light on victory conditions. They've gone very hard in the direction of shaving planeswalkers or creatures or whatever. But that's because they have Secure the Waste to find. Once they flip Search for Azcanta, they're going to cycle all the way through their deck. And even though you can often finish somebody off with bolts and electrolyzes and helixes and so on, you don't want it to have to come to that. If you can just cycle all the way through your deck and know that you're going to be able to find an instant or sorcery that will actually just win the game for you. So 1 Secure the Waste here is very much a kill condition that he's planning on tutoring up with the Search for Azcantas.
Oh, that is pretty cool. Versus like the 1 Think Twice, which is really kind of just there to...
That's random.
To smooth, right?
Yeah, and... you could use Think Twice. It does have some positive interaction. It's cool when you search for Azcanta, look at the top card of your deck, it's Think Twice, and you just bin it. Then it's like you just save mana, right? But the problem is that your slots are just so eaten up. It's hard to spend the mana that way. I think you can do it if you want, but remember, Aintrazi's list doesn't even feature Opt or Serum Vision, any of that stuff, right? And in particular, he definitely strayed from the conventional sort of approach. Most people use some cantrips and extra cantrips. Like, for instance, Thought Scour in particular is nice when you play your instant speed game with stuff like Snapcaster Mage, but it's also nice for making sure that you flip Search for Azcanta ASAP.
Oh, wow, that is a really awesome combination.
It also is a great interaction with Logic Knot. Being able to, like, the fact that you can Thought Scour yourself and then Logic Knot for more than it looks like your mana is able to pay.
Yeah, so, like, just for sake of argument, if you had no cards in your graveyard but you had 3 mana open, you could potentially Thought Scour, put 3 cards into your graveyard, and then Logic Knot for 3, right?
Exactly. So when people are thinking that this is the spot, you can actually get them.
That's cool.
Yeah, mainly though, I think that I really think you're going to want a few more cantrips in a deck like this. Some number. You don't need to go that crazy with it, but a few cantrips I think can help a lot. Most other people were not playing Glimmer of Genius. That was a little bit of an Aintrazi special, and I'm interested. One of the things I like about the Glimmer of Genius in this list is how much extra value it gives your Cryptic Commands. You know the game of you keep 4 open and they're like, okay, well, then I don't want to play into your Cryptic?
Yep.
But if you just Glimmer of Genius right there, you're really progressing the game.
So
additionally, get some extra mileage out of those Torrential Gearhulks he's playing instead of extra Snapcaster Mages.
Yeah, this deck is really, I think, oddly tuned from the perspective of the available cards in Modern. He has so many expensive cards. Like, 4 Cryptic Command itself, I think, is that's a heavy...
No, I don't know. I think 4 Cryptic Command is going to be very, very common in these decks. I think if you're playing a Search for Azcanta control deck, like I think you would play 6 Cryptic Commands.
So what you're saying is if you're going to do it, you better do it.
Yeah, I think it's just so good in this strategy. I mean, it's a very powerful card anyway, of course, right? It's a little slow, but it's very powerful. But once you start Search for Azcanta-ing where you're going through your deck, there's nothing you want as much as a Cryptic Command, because like even just a Fog is fantastic when you're Search for Azcanta-ing.
Yeah, I'm trying to wrap my head around that. That's so much mana. That's 8 lands, right?
Yeah. No, but you don't have to use. No. You don't have to activate it. You hold up the Search for Azcanta. It's one of your mana sources. If they play a spell worth countering, you Cryptic. If they don't play a spell worth countering, you activate the Azcanta. You don't have to do both in the same turn. I'm saying that when you're cycling through, okay, like you know how your opponent, if they have Cryptic Command mana open, you don't want that to be the turn you make your move. But if one of those 4 lands is Azcanta, and they tap the other 3 to activate Azcanta, that's extremely efficient.
Yes.
Like like when Azcanta has flipped, so you have the legendary land.
Yep. Sunken Ruin. I know him.
It takes 4 mana.
Yes.
So like, I don't know. I think it's just so good to be able to do both of those. And while you're digging, what more do you want to look for than more Cryptic Commands?
I think it depends on the matchup. If you're playing against Abzan, for example, I think just running Cryptic Command after Cryptic Command might be awesome, right? They're playing expensive cards like Siege Rhino. I think that if you're playing against maybe a fast aggro deck, you want to, let's say you have 5 or 6 mana, just getting Lightning Helixes or Lightning Bolts might be better. Just depends, I think.
Better? You're already playing those cards.
No, getting them with the Azcanta the Sunken Ruin.
All right, all I'm saying, man, is that every card in your deck has purpose some of the time. Cryptic Command is the card that is the best, the most. Like, you notice he doesn't have 4 of anything else except Path to Exile. Oh. Cryptic Command is good in all of the spots. That's assuming once you have 4 mana, but it's implicit because once you're activating Azcanta, you already have enough to cast Cryptic. Of course, there's going to be spots where you take stuff to be mana efficient, but in general, Cryptic is the thing you're going to want the most. And actually, that's part of the reason why most people don't play stuff like Glimmer of Genius, is because they're already doing that by activating Search for Azcanta. Yeah. That's part of the reason why I think you might want to just be playing cheap cantrips instead, so that you can smooth out your draw before you get to that spot. Because I think once you get to that spot, you're already cooking with gas.
So you were earlier talking about Opt. Is this yet another spot where Hieroglyphic Illumination might be better than both Opt and Glimmer of Genius? No, that seems cray-cray to me.
I don't know. I don't think so. Because I don't think you're really going to Gearhulk the Illumination. It's just too much better to Gearhulk Cryptic Command.
Yep.
I also just think that Opt is enough better than Hieroglyphic Illumination that you should be in Modern. Now, of course, that's partly because I play more than one Snapcaster Mage, and I think most of the other Jeskai decks that we could look at are going to have more than one Snapcaster Mage. I like Torrential Gearhulk, don't get me wrong. I just also like Snapcaster Mage, too.
If you've got... First of all, he's got a Nahiri the Harbinger as kind of one of the fatty boom booms at the top of his curve at 4, right? And then
I just can't get behind 4-drops when you've got Search for Azcanta and all these cryptics. Supreme Verdict has a purpose, but other than that, I think that you got to, like, if you're going to get your power from Gearhulk, Cryptic Command, and Search for Azcanta and Supreme Verdict, I think you got to just be playing the rest of your cards need to be freaking lightning bolts and stuff.
I think I agree with you, but it does give him. I mean, it's a minority of games, right? Because he only has one copy of Nahiri the Harbinger in the main deck, or at all. So, but if you get it. Like, your deck does gain the capability of doing something completely different.
That's true. Being able to hit the artifact, that's fair.
Like, it plays like the Sun and Moon deck, right? Like, with this one card in play. Now, you're not getting Emrakul, but getting a Torrential Gearhulk that's going to basically implicitly going to kind of fire twice, that's pretty good, right? Like, it takes you, I don't know if you're going to want to just blow up Nahiri, but let's say that you just go ++ Torrential Gearhulk. That's a lot of card advantage. And it's, you've got implicitly going to have 6 mana because you just plus twice, so that gives you a couple of loots. You already had 4 mana in play. It's going to be fueling Search for Azcanta, among other things, because dumping cards in the graveyard, that's what it does. So I think that's a pretty cool
I think the fact having it as a one-off way to be able to get rid of an artifact and being able to hit a big creature, exiling too. You convinced me, because it's not like Search for Azcanta can't help you find the Nahiri, because as long as you don't shuffle, even though you're putting Nahiri on the bottom, you can know where in your deck it is and how deep you have to dig to get to it.
Yeah, I like this card because it's a relatively efficient solution to Reality Smasher, guys like that, right? Where you can smash its reality without any loss of card advantage. In fact, card advantage.
Okay.
No, you don't like that?
No, it's fine. It's just I don't think that's a high leverage aspect of the card.
Well, for a deck with Cryptic Command and Mana Leak in particular, right? So
Path to Exile.
Yeah, so I mean it's a thing. Yeah,
it's okay.
It's in the range of available plays. But I gotta say, I think Ollie's deck is a little clunky looking to me for Modern. It has a lot. It can have a lot of really poor draws, right? If you have this many 4s and 6s, like you just don't draw the right half of your deck in the early game sometimes. And
this is also a deck that has 3 Logic Knots, a Plains, a Sacred Foundry, a Field of Ruin, a Desolate Lighthouse. And that's not even counting the possibility of drawing like Sulphur Falls and Glacial Fortress or any amount of that stuff. Celestial Colonnade with I just worry about 3 Logic Knots, man.
Like I would say as a person who's a red aggro or a burn player at heart, I don't really want to play against very many decks that have Lightning Bolt, Lightning Helix, and 4-Pad to Exile in their main deck. But if I had to play against one, I think I'd rather play against this one than some other Jeskai decks.
Maybe. I still don't like your chances, man.
No?
Particularly when Soulfire Grandmaster comes in out of the sideboard. Oh, baby. Lightning Helix plus Soulfire Grandmaster. Thanks.
I'm aware of how that works.
Oh, yeah.
I've been on the wrong side of that. I mean, not that particular combo, but Soulfire Grandmaster and anything back in Standard. If you were just like the 2/2 green guy, that's wasn't pretty. Like Soulfire Grandmaster and Kolaghan's Command, that was unfun sometimes. So
Benjamin Nicolic's deck finishing 5th. He actually was playing a Jeskai list that was very similar, except the biggest differences are, first of all, he has a Johnny Vengeant instead of Nahiri. He's got 3 Snapcasters and 1 Gearhulk instead of 2 Gearhulks and a Snapcaster.
Well, that's a really logical switch, though. If you're gonna not play Nahiri, then you're gonna de-emphasize Torrential Gearhulk.
Yep. And then he's got 4 Serum Visions, and the way he made room for those, first of all, he's got a Sphinx's Revelation instead of a Search for Azcanta, number 3. But he's got he's got 4 Serum Visions by just shaving a little everything. He, cut those 2 Glimmer Geniuses, and then he's got 1 less Supreme Verdict. He doesn't play. He doesn't play the Mana Leaks. He's actually just got a Spell Snare and a Negate instead.
But he cut a Celestial Colonnade. That's a big cut for this archetype.
No. He only played 3. Aintrazi only played 3 also.
Well, if he plays 24 lands. Oh, right.
Yeah, he plays 1 less land. But it's Field of Ruin.
Fair enough.
But yeah, one thing I do like about this list is the Runed Halo. Runed Halo's ability to interact with with some combo decks, with being able to interact with burn, being able to hit certain types of problematic creatures. I'm a fan,
Oh, yeah, Runed Halo on Eidolon of the Great Revel must be fantastic, right? It becomes super one-way at that point, right?
Yeah, I mean, you want an answer to Reality Smasher. Just put down Runed Halo.
Well, that's an answer to all the Reality Smashers they draw.
Yeah.
So if you cast Runed Halo and you name Grape Shot, for example, does that save you from the subsequent Grape Shots? Yeah,
they can't target you. One of the effects of protection from the chosen name is
cool.
Yep.
Okay.
Yeah, Grape Shot. The other copies aren't being played, but they still can't target you. Or they can't be cast. They just already are cast, except they can't target you, so you are protected from Grape Shots if you want. It doesn't help. It can't stop you it can't stop Goblin tokens, though. You do got to be careful. You can't name stuff that isn't the name of a card. You can't just name tokens. So, for instance, you wouldn't be able to stop somebody Secure the Waste by naming Warrior or something.
Got it. But you could stop, their Snapcaster Mage or their Torrential Gearhulk, right?
Or their Colonnade, but I don't think you usually want to have it against a deck like this anyway. The mirror is not where you want it. But it does here's an interesting one that a lot of people don't remember, that they don't realize. You can Runed Halo and say Gifts Ungiven.
Oh, that's awesome, because Gifts Ungiven targets you, right?
Yeah.
You cast it?
Yeah, they need to target an opponent to do this to do the choosing. And if you have protection from Gifts Ungiven, you cannot be forced to choose from Gifts Ungiven, and then you're effectively just cranial extracting all their Gifts Ungiven for 2 mana.
So, let's say you draw a Runed Halo, and your opponent taps out for Goblin Electromancer. It's turn 3, and you're like, all right, I have a window here. Or it's turn 2, whatever. I have a window here. Would you Halo Gifts Ungiven there, or would you Halo Grape Shot, or would you save it?
And this is game 2?
Game 2.
Because they're going to have Gifts Ungiven. Because they're definitely, I think I would name Gifts Ungiven, because I think they're going to have Empty the Warrens. I don't think you can count on Grape Shot actually beating them. If you name Grape Shot, that it's actually going to beat them. I just think they're going to be able, if they start going off, they're going to be able to create a pretty awesome board with Empty the Warrens. And that's not even counting the possibility of them blood mooning us,
Yeah.
So I want to name Gifts Ungiven and slow them down.
That is a spectacular piece of tech, then. I like it.
Yeah.
I like it a lot.
Yeah, it's good.
So, just generally speaking, these decks are pretty similar, like you said. Do you like this version better because of the presence of Serum Visions? Or I think that if I was going to go that direction, personally, if I was going to start with Benjamin Nikolich's deck, I might just opt for Opt instead of Serum Visions in that slot.
This is going to sound funny, but I don't know that I even hate a mix. It's I know it's funny, but when you actually when you can afford to do it main phase, it's nice to have Serum Visions. When you want to do it instant speed, it's nice to have Opt. Generally speaking, I think Thought Scour is an opt. So I think opt is probably just the best one to do anyway. But like, Thought Scour is also an interesting one to have in small numbers. So like, for instance, I think I would play. Yeah, I don't know. It's weird. I guess I would probably lean towards. I don't know, a mix. How about that? Put me down for 3 ops and maybe 1. No, just give me ops. Yeah, I think opt is. Yeah. I think you're right.
The reason I like opt is there's just, if you're going to play this many Snapcaster Mages, right? He's got 3 Snapcaster Mages. Ollie only played 1, right? Which, with no Serum Visions, that's going to imply different things about the mechanics of your deck. But I kind of like the play pattern of just opting and then nothing else is going on. You just go Snapcaster Mage opt and then just get your stuff on. Like, versus doing nothing, right? Like, that's a perfectly not horrible turn 3 play that can do everything from ensuring your next land drop to fixing your colors for Cryptic Command to, you know, it doesn't feed Search for Azcanta very well, actually quite the opposite, but it might help dig you to Search for Azcanta. It might dig you to Search for Azcanta with Negate open. You know, there's a bunch of stuff you can do there, and I think it's good, right? Like, just extra opt, get a body in play, and, you know, see what happens.
What do you think about the possibility of playing Esper, or at least splashing black for Lingering Souls?
In a deck that has red, or in a deck that's
Either way. Lingering Souls with Search for Azcanta.
I really like Lingering Souls. I think it depends on what other people are playing to a degree. For example, not that long ago, you know, I think inside of the last 2 months, there was a mini resurgence of Infect, where we saw at least one classic that had multiple Infect decks in the top 8. If you think that there's going to be Infect, man, there's almost nothing you'd rather have on defense than Lingering Souls, right? Like, their deck is just not good at piercing Lingering Souls while you're setting up cards like Supreme Verdict and point removal cards. But I think in the dark, I like Lightning Helix more than I like Lingering Souls. I like a Johnny Vengeant more than, I don't know if there's a commensurate card.
Fatal Push or Lightning Bolt? Come on, you got to admit it's Fatal Push.
I mean, if you're playing a control deck, Fatal Push is way better than Lightning Bolt. Way better.
Being able to play 4 path, 4 push. Yeah,
you're not going to take a lot of creature damage in the early game. Man, this is really disheartening for me. These Jeskai decks being up there. What's good against them?
Plenty. I mean, I think you can just whatever they don't have, like whichever cards they don't have in their sideboard to begin with.
Like, is there just no graveyard hate right now? Like, what is there? There's 2 Relic candidates here. I mean, there might.
Yeah, Aintrazi had. I think he just had like a couple surgical. He had 1 surgical extraction.
Man.
Yeah, no, everybody's doing the like skip the dredge stuff this time.
Oh wow, might be the weekend then. I mean, forget about dredge. If you're gonna go, you might as well go hard. Like you could go Gorios or something, right? Why give him the extra turn?
Interesting.
You know, what's the green Nourishing Shoal? Maybe Nourishing Shoal combo.
Dude, you know what you can do with Search for Azcanta? You can discard Grizzlebrand.
You mean like flip it or whatever?
Yeah, like discard it, like or put it into your graveyard from the top of your deck.
Yeah, you can do that.
Maybe Search for Azcanta is supposed to be in some kind of a Grixis Goryo's Vengeance deck, man.
I mean, it's actually...
That sounds kind of sweet.
All right, imagine your thought scouring, etc., right? Yeah. I don't think it's out of the question to get Unburial Rights, right? Like, Unburial is a pretty powerful Magic card, and if you're playing a progressive game...
Maybe. Unburial Rights is pretty different than the Goryo's Vengeance deck I was imagining.
Yeah, but the thing is, if you're playing a Search for Azcanta deck, right, maybe you want to play a long game. Unburial Rights is a heck of a Magic card. These decks are playing...
You don't need Unburial Rights once you're Azcanta-ing. Just go find Goryo's Vengeance and then Goryo's Vengeance them.
That's one way to go. Another way to go is if we're thought scouring, etc., and search for Azcanta, we might be flipping over Grizzlebrand and
Thought Scour's even better with Goryo's Vengeance.
That is pretty powerful.
On turn 3, you do the thing.
Yeah, I think that there might be a wide open spot for graveyard decks.
So just say you start with a turn 1 discard spell, like a Thoughtseize or an Inquisition or whatever. Obviously, there's a lot of other ways you can like set up the perfect Goryo's Vengeance game, but like if you just play a Search for Azcanta on turn 2, sometimes you're just going to randomly do things like flip over a Grizzlebrand or an Emrakul, and you'll already have Goryo's Vengeance mana ready. You know?
Oh, that has got to be the worst. If your Search for Azcanta flips over an Emrakul, you put the trigger on the stack, and you're just like, Vengeant.
Plus, it's like Thought Scour's good for either plan. Dude, I don't know. You could play Jace, too. I always like Jace in the Goryo's Vengeance decks.
Oh, the creature Jace?
Yeah.
Oh, that is a powerful card.
Yeah, when you Goryo's Vengeance Jace, you can flip him and then keep him.
Oh, man, this is fancy.
Plus, it's not like Jace doesn't fuel your Search for Azcanta, and you can use Jace to discard your Grizzlebrand and your Emrakul.
I'm actually kind of in love with this, because Jace he's a really powerful card that for some reason no one is playing. Look, not every deck can interact with him very well. He's
really good.
Really good. How about the champ? The champion once again. He wins all these Star City events. Dylan Donegan finished first in Baltimore with Grixis Death Shadow.
Yeah, Grixis Death Shadow's just quietly the best deck. It doesn't mean that it's like so good that it's like for sure you should play it, because a lot of people know that Death Shadow is super good, but it's also the kind of deck that, even when you're like slanted against it, it's not like they can't, There's also a lot of ways you can build it. Like, for instance, Donegan's got, a fair bit of spice in here. A couple Stubborn Denials are kind of nice. It's not out of the question. It's not like crazy compared, like, people do that sometimes, they do that sometimes, but I particularly like the use of Stubborn Denial now that he has Opt. I think Opt and Stubborn Denial work really well together. When you can hold up 1 mana for Stubborn Denial, and then if they don't do anything worth Stubborn Denialing, you can Opt.
This is a lot like what you were saying with the Cryptic Command and the Glimmer of Genius kind of making each other better.
Oh, yeah, just being very efficient with your mana. Like being able to threaten some piece of interaction without just wasting the mana. It's very telling that he's playing 4 Opt and 4 Thought Scour, but just 2 Serum Visions. And by the way, it may look sort of random, the idea of playing 10 cantrips, like, why doesn't he just have 12, And you have to draw the line somewhere. But funny enough, it's actually an awful lot like the Sly mana curve. It's not actually like out of nowhere that people, like, very often you'll see these kind of decks have 10 or 11 cantrips. Sometimes they'll have less too. And obviously there's Street Wraith and stuff. But the reason Street Wraith is in a different camp is that it doesn't cost any mana.
Yes.
When you play 10 or 11 cantrips that cost 1, it's maximizing the chances of drawing at least 1 cantrip while minimizing the chances of drawing multiples. It's sort of the thing that you might be interested in, and it depends on how much you weigh each of these compared to each other. But it's very common that you're going to see decks that, just like the decks that would use 10 and 1-drops, like 10 or 11 1-drop creatures. That's very much what's going on here. Is that there's a desire to have access to 1 cantrip in your opening hand, but to not want to just get ultra flooded with them, because they do have diminishing returns.
I think that they're really good some of the time, right? Depending on your plan. Like, if you just want to fill your graveyard so that you can play Gurmag Angler or Tazir the Golden Fang versus having to commit for Death Shadow, they are very productive in multiples in that case.
Definitely, but he's got lots of other stuff too, like Fatal Pushes and Lightning Bolts and Thought Seizes and so on. The point is that you don't want to be spinning your wheels. You want to have options to some of the other cards.
Yeah, I think that's one of the fatal flaws that some players get into with cantrips, because you love a cantrip, I love a cantrip, but Brian Kibler taught me this. You can only dirtle so much. At some point, you got to drop your dragon.
Yep.
I think this deck is super respectable. I tend to agree with you. I think if I had to pick a single best deck in Modern, and I couldn't for some reason pick Boros Burn, I think I'd lean in this camp. I like Donegan's list for a couple reasons. I super respect the inclusion of Opt, like you mentioned already. I love the one Kolaghan's Command, and I love the one Temur Battle Rage. Battle Rage.
I don't love the one Kolaghan's Command. Yeah, one Battle Rage, that's the right kind of spice. But I don't think I could play only one. I think I would play two Kolaghan's Commands. I would play one Temur Battle Rage or a 0. Either way is fine. I think one seems pretty sweet. But I would play two Kolaghan's Commands. I just can't quit that card.
It depends on what you think your matchups are, because I think...
No, honestly, it doesn't for me.
No?
To me, if it does, it's because I'm deciding between 2 and 3.
Well, here's the thing. If you love Grixis the most, and your mindset...
And I do.
Yes, I know it. That's the case. Your mindset is that other smart players in contention will also be Grixis. In my experience...
Whoa. I missed that second part. I don't know why I would assume that.
Well...
How often do people play Grixis? It's not even 10% of the field, right?
I don't know, man. I mean, Kolaghan's Command, in my experience, is the card you want to draw in the Grixis mirror. It seemed really efficient to me. Like, Snapcaster Mages chaining Kolaghan's Command into Snapcaster Mages is a way to win.
Sure. But that's still... It's not because of the Grixis matchup that you want that. The card is just unreal good.
Yeah, it's good. I agree.
Yeah.
The interesting thing to me is how almost so thoroughly Grixis Death Shadow has extincted Jund Death Shadow. Like, Jund Death Shadow was the man a year ago, right? Like, the Tarmogoyf Traverse the Uvenwald deck. Like, no one seems to game with that anymore.
Yeah, I think the printing of Opt is sort of the straw that broke the camel's back. You know, like, the fact that you have access to Opt, it's giving you just enough power that, combined with how much having access to 4 stubborn denials or whatever type of counter magic you want, like, it's kind of a nice little extra dimension. And I think part of it is the printing of Fatal Push. Well, Fatal Push has been around, but I mean, like, once you're playing this many Inquisitions and Fatal Pushes and so on, you don't always necessarily want to be Abrupt Decay City. And part of it also, I guess, is not everybody has always played with 4 Snapcaster Mages, you know? Like, when Snapcaster Mage is good, you know, there are many times where Snapcaster Mage is better than Tarmogoyf. Not always, but it depends on the format. And when a lot of people are grinding with 2-for-1s, you know, if everybody's decks are just full of Fatal Pushes and stuff, you'd way rather have a Snapcaster Mage than a Tarmogoyf.
Oh, Dylan's really, like, can go in the grinding direction, so he has 4 Snapcaster Mages in the main deck, like you mentioned, but he can also go to 2 Young Pyromancers after sideboarding for even more 2-1 for 2 wizard action.
Well, plus the 2 Liliana the Veils and 1 Liliana the Last Hope.
Absolutely. But he makes some substantial trade-offs to do that, right? He's only got 1 Collective Brutality in his entire 75, and I think that's...
that's okay, Batman. I think that's okay. He's got 6 discard spells main deck.
Oh, man. Collective Brutality is in the class by itself, though, in my opinion.
I guess he's got 7 if you count Kolaghan's Command.
Like, I don't know, when you're throwing multiple of those options out and feeding your future task,
you're always just imagining that you're the burn deck, and the Collective Brutality is killing your Goblin Guide, making you discard your Boros Charm,
it's always
and
the Boros
draining
Charm.
You for 2.
All those things, yeah.
I know. Dude, you think I'm always the guy with the Collective Brutality. I play against 3 of you jokers playing Burn in every Modern tournament, and every single time just have to Collective Brutality you, get the, like, 17 for 1. Well, it's kind of 3 for 3, but the efficiency is just unreal.
It doesn't feel like a 3 for 3 at 2 mana.
No, not at all.
That's not what it feels like.
Yeah, I mean, part of that is just the fact that trading 0 mana to trade one of your cards for one of the burn decks cards is better than you could ever hope for.
Well, especially...
Right? Like, you want to counterspell their cards. You want to make them discard their card. You're willing to pay mana. The fact that you can do it without paying mana is so good, because all you want to do is trade some cards, because then your Gurmag Anglers, your Tassigers, your Snapcaster Mages, they give you an advantage, and then you end up on top.
Wait a second. Does Dylan have only 2 Inquisitions in his main deck?
Yeah, that's fine. No, that's fine. Yeah, I mean, you got to play... No, it would be for a normal Grixis deck, but when you're playing Death Shadow, you got to play 4 Thoughtseize. And I don't think you need to play 8 discard spells once you have access to multiple main deck Stubborn Denials. That's part of how that's how he has the room. It's not... You're right. You are right. Lots of people play 4 Inquisitions, but part of the way he's doing it is by, he's got Stubborn Denial instead. And I think that in Grixis, you have a little bit less of a need to be playing 8 the way that you do in, like, Jund, for instance.
When the 2 classic I guess there's 3 classic control combos. When Grixis battles against Jeskai, who do you think has got the advantage at this point in Modern? Where you got the Jeskai.
Well, it radically depends on both builds. You want to talk about specifically Aintrazi and Donegan?
Yeah, if we're talking, I think that those are going to be emblematic. Let's say those 2.
I mean, I personally think that the Grixis Death Shadow deck has the advantage. When you're playing, like, this is kind of a top-heavy Jeskai Control deck, and I don't know, I guess I'm a little bit wary of, like, how reliant Aintrazi is on Path to Exile.
Yeah, it's a biggie, right? Because Path to Exile can take out theoretically any of Dylan's threats, but Ollie's only got so many of them, and any of these threats, if you let it live for like 2 turns, might just be lethal.
Yeah, and it's tough to want to be on the Supreme Verdict plan against a deck that has 7 discard spells, multiple main deck Stubborn... Oh, the Stubborn Denials don't help specifically against the Supreme Verdict, admittedly, but when you're playing against a deck that just has so many cards that cost 1 mana, it's hard to be the guy playing with Glimmer of Genius and Electrolyze and Search for Azcanta and Think Twice and Torrential Gearhulk and Nahiri.
I don't think you want to be the Lightning Bolt, Lightning Helix, Glimmer of Genius guy, especially Electrolyze guy, against a deck with a ton of 5 toughness or, 13 creatures or whatever. And so there is a point, though, because you can go the other way. If you've got 4, if you're the guy with 4 Lightning Bolts, 4 Lightning Helixes, 4 Electrolyzes, you start getting to a spot where you can actually, because like when you're playing against Death Shadow, yeah, this is set up to 7.
Like you can often get yourself to a spot, like if you just have 9 points of damage, because you got 4 Snapcasters too, if you want. I don't know.
Oh, I've been there. I know what you're talking about.
Oh yeah. And it's not the same, because like when a burn deck plays against Death Shadow, they can still do all that, but very often the burn deck just doesn't have any cards left in their hand. But like,
yeah, because people like you and your collective brutalities are taking away our cards and killing our creatures all at once.
The one thing I will say, though, is if you play Search for Azcanta on turn 2 against these Death Shadow decks, you're looking pretty good if you're not dead. Because if you just hang out, like, you don't have to do all that. Like, the fact that Dylan's already making these choices in order to be able to grind, he's not going to outgrind Search for Azcanta.
I think that he gets good optionality after sideboarding by adding all these Lilianas and Young Pyromancer and Kolaghan's Command after sideboarding. Like, I think his deck is... I think he could hang with the Jeskai deck.
Hang with the Jeskai deck? I think he's going to beat the Jeskai deck. No,
I'm just saying I think he could hang on the card advantage part of the game, right? He's got a way faster clock, right? Like if you're adding Lilianas and Young...
Yeah, I'm just talking about game 1. Yeah, I'm just saying game 1, Search for Azcanta is like a decent thing, but I think you're still going to just be too slow anyway. And then I think you're gaining a lot more out of your sideboard. I mean, Aintrazi is already largely sideboarded against Death Shadow,
Yeah.
I still give the edge to Death Shadow.
I think there's going to be some weird games that are decided by Temur Battle Rage, even though there's only one. Oh, there's one in the sideboard too. You
know what you want to do with against these Jeskai decks is play Lingering Souls. Lingering Souls that's going to mess them up.
Yeah? Tell me about this. Why is Lingering Souls so good against the Jeskai Control deck?
So, like, what are they going to do? Are they going to Lightning Bolt a token? Are they going to Mana Leak half of the Lingering Souls? Are they going to Path to Exile a token?
You hope, right? Like,
what's his plan? Is it Supreme Verdict? He's going to tap out to Supreme Verdict? He's got 2 Electrolyze and 3 Supreme Verdict.
All right, so let's just run this off the tops then, right? You've intimated this a couple of times. Let's twist the metagame a little bit. Let's start with the Jeskai Control deck and then kind of go Lingering Souls and Fatal Push. Is that just a better position in the metagame? Because it sounds like that would be a dominating position in the heads-up Jeskai against Esper matchup. And all of a sudden, if you're the deck that has 4 Path and 4 Fatal Push, I think that's a lot better against most of the beatdown decks and certainly against Grixis, right? You have way more applicable things to kill big creatures.
Sure. I don't know. I don't like. I see. I greatly prefer Lightning Bolt to Fatal Push against Grixis Death Shadow. I don't know. It's weird. It's like obviously Fatal Push can kill the Death Shadow, and that's sweet. But I just hate having Fatal Push against Gurmag Angle and Tasigur. And it's not like Lightning Bolt is great, right? Like that's not what you want. But it's not necessarily the worst.
How do you feel about Chain to the Rocks? Do you think that's a good card?
I think it's a decent card. I don't know if it's a good time for it. I don't think it is. Where do you want to Chain to the Rocks?
I play a lot of Chain to the Rocks, but I mean that's in burn.
In a burn deck,
I don't know
sure.
if I played in.
Yeah, no, I would play deck. I would play Chain to the Rocks in a burn deck in the sideboard. That's fine. It depends on the metagame, but that's totally fine. I thought you were talking about like in some kind of a Jeskai Control deck.
Yeah, I was just wondering, applicability there. It's very different in the burn deck because the burn deck's worst.
Snapcaster Mage.
In a burn deck, the worst enemy that you can have, I think, is a first turn Noble Hierarch, and so you have this situation where you have to eliminate the Noble Hierarch before they can cast a 3 with it. Because if they cast it could be anything from a Courser Crucifix to a Knight of the Reliquary. It could be all kinds of stuff that is just much better than everything in your deck. And they have too much initiative if you let them do it on the second turn. So you kind of need a 1-mana way to eliminate it. So Path to Exile is terrible. So you Path to Exile with first turn Noble Hierarchs is the same. You just discarded a card. So you want more things like Lightning Bolt, but that also give you options against cards like Reality Smasher or Death Shadow or, Tasigur. And so I thought that Chain to the Rocks was a good option for that.
Sure. Dude, what do you think of Gerard Fabiano's Temur Breach deck? He finished top 16. He was playing, basically, what do you think about this deck, both on its own merits and then also as a potential home for Search for Azcanta?
Well, I really like the Breach archetype, the blue-red centered Breach archetype as a thing. It has a lot of interesting stuff going on for the meta. For example, it's a Blood Moon deck, right, and a Cryptic Command deck, and we've already talked about how Cryptic Command is so powerful in the Jeskai deck, and you're a big proponent of 4 Cryptic Commands in Grixis Control, for example, historically.
Sometimes it depends. Whenever it's right.
Also a Blood Moon.
And then half the time when it's not.
You love it. Right? Whether or not it's good, it doesn't change whether or not you love it.
Oh, yeah. I definitely love it.
So, it's got those elements, and this deck can kind of play fair, right? It can play fair because it's got remans and ops and mana leaks to just play like a progressive control game, and you're just like, here's a Wormcoil engine. That's a thing that's good against players. Or maybe here's a Vendilion Click. That's a thing that the control decks sometimes play. But then it has this entire combo thing that you can do, right? So if you just go through the Breach Emrakul, that's just a really powerful thing. Like, a lot of decks can't stop you. Like, any of the mid-range decks, or Burn, or Eldrazi, like, those decks don't really stop you from casting a card like Through the Breach, and then you just annihilate them with Emrakul. So I think that it has this stuff that's going on that's really powerful. It captures, I think, a lot of the incentive of the green decks, but then trades in Primeval Titan for, tempo gaining cards like Remand or filtering abilities to make your mid game better. But I hadn't thought about it as a Search for Azcanta deck.
So I think if you're going to do the Search for Azcanta thing, Temur, I worry that Temur is kind of like the thing you're getting out of green is sort of the thing that Search for Azcanta is doing. So I'm not sure you even need it. Like here, Fabiano's only green cards are 3 Tarmogoyfs and 2 Tireless Trackers.
All of those green cards that you mentioned, the Tarmogoyfs and the Tireless Trackers, are all in Gerard's sideboard.
Right.
So it's not even central to the deck.
Yeah, it's just his backup plan. Right? Like he's already playing he's sort of got like this Through the Breach thing mixed with playing a Blue Moon deck, with like a Worm Coil instead of a Batterskull, and then he's got sort of just hang out and have a few different options, a Vendilion Click here, a Jace there. He's got a variety of different little plans, but then he's got the backup plan where he switches to the beatdown and plays 3 Tarmogoyfs and 2 Trackers. And I can't help but wonder if he's really getting enough mileage out of those green cards.
You're right, he's not. And I can't believe I missed this. This is just a Blue Moon deck. It's a non-committal Blue Moon deck, though.
Yep.
Right? Like, you could just switch these numbers a little bit, right? Like, add another Blood Moon and add some mana leaks, and he would have a lot of the central incentive to Blue Moon, and then he just has this other powerful strategy grafted on. Oh, he only has 21 lands.
Fabiano always just, does he play? He cuts it close. He's razor thin margins.
But he's got
on his mana bases.
He's got 4 drops he has to cast under pressure and a 6 casting cost card in his deck. Forget about the Emrakuls. Forget about that. But he's a 6 casting cost card in his deck, and his sideboard Color Splash is predicated on running multiple land triggers. This is like a little bit off to me.
Hey, okay, so what do you think about 12th place Ben Feingersh's Humans deck? That Humans deck we've talked about has proven itself a steady fixture in the format. It's not dominating. People have adjusted. You're going to see, you're seeing just there's Lades at Statocasters, Damnations, Anger the Gods, Supreme Verdicts all over the place. Like the metagame has definitely needed to make some adjustments. But people have gone about and done that, and the deck is still persisting as a sort of omnipresent feature. That 4 Ancient Ziggurat, 4 Cavernous Souls, 4 Unclaimed Territory, Humans engine.
I absolutely love, super respect this strategy. I think it's one of the most innovative decks that we've seen in some time. Feingersh here has actually departed quite a bit, though. He's got Grafdigger's Cage and Dismember in his sideboard. Historically, this deck has just had more humans in the sideboard for the most part. So he's actually...
I don't think you need to be that pure.
I think that it's actually an important distinction just because adding Dismember gives him the ability to interact with people's... Is it Statocasters or Grim Lavamancers? Because this deck just... It's real tough. If your opponent just plays...
That's actually... Go ahead.
Plays a Grim Lavamancer, you just can't interact with it. It just kills everything in your deck.
That's true. That's a really good point. And Grafdigger's Cage and Dismember are in a different camp than spells would be, most spells, because they're colorless.
Yep.
So your Cavernous Souls and Unclaimed Territory actually do cast them. And it's not like he's got a ton. He's only got 15 land that can potentially cast a Grafdigger's Cage or a Dismember. But that's still a lot more than the amount of land in his deck that can cast, like, say, a Path Exile.
Yeah, the one thing that I would say I don't like about this deck, because I think it's regressed a little bit from some versions that we'd seen previously, is he only has one copy of
Dahlia Heretic Cathar?
Oh, yeah, that's part of it. This has less land than we've seen before, right? He does have
20. Yeah, he's playing 19 instead of 20, but some people have played 19.
He has 4 copies of Horizon Canopy. I like that a lot, actually, because the value of the lands that you draw in the mid game in this deck are like pretty low, especially if you drew a Nether Vial, because all your cards cost 2, except for like the 1 Thalia that he's got and Mantis Rider. Like everything else is super cheap. So, or I guess Reflector Mage, but it doesn't matter. Like once you have 2 lands in an Aether Vial, you can just anything that you draw, you can just drop.
Okay, here's a couple things I like about this one. First of all, in the sideboard, Riders of Gavani, this one's always been nice. I mean, this one was such sick tech in block, then sick tech in standard. This is 2 white, 3/3 vigilance. As Riders of Gavani enters the battlefield, choose a creature type. Human creatures you control have protection from creatures of the chosen type.
So you can name Merfolk.
You can name Merfolk. You can name human.
Yeah. You can name human.
Like, human is just devastating in the mirror match, right?
Yes. It is. I mean, I think the word unbeatable probably gets overused, but this seems pretty hard to beat for a deck that has very few ways to directly interact with other people's permanents.
Except for like stuff like Reflector Mage, which can't even bounce the Riders.
No, it's protection from humans, right?
Right.
You can't do anything. Right?
You can dismember if you're the guy with dismembers. He's ready. He's at the next level.
He is both the guy with dismember and the guy with Riders of Gavoni.
So what do you think of these Dark Confidants? 1 in the main and 2 in the board.
It's almost like he made room for the Dark Confidant in the main by cutting that land, and the Dark Confidant in the main is going to go get him future land if he had his first 2. It kind of feels like that, right?
Yeah.
I don't know. I think that your Dark Confidant mileage will vary dramatically in Modern depending on what archetype you are. This deck doesn't really have like the things that make Dark Confidant like real busted. It just draws more creatures. And I think that the kind of matchups where Dark Confidant shines, you just don't need to draw more creatures. You need to, draw like Thoughtseizes or Inquisitions or removal spells. I don't know. That's my opinion.
I think I agree with you.
Right? Like, you need like a heavier hitting thing instead.
So you mentioned earlier Infect. Chris O'Brien's got some spicy new tech. He finished 15th with Infect. Now, it's easy to get kind of hypnotized by the fact that his Infect deck has 2 copies of Jace Vryn's Prodigy in the main deck. But that's not all the tech. That's not all he's got. But what do you think of that, though, right out the gate? Jace Vryn's Prodigy.
Love it. Like, love it, love it.
Can help fuel Become Immense. It can serve as sort of a backup plan. It can interact. It's a powerful card.
It could just pump your guy for 8, right?
But you can just give it hexproof with your 4 Vines of the Vastwood, 3 Blossoming Defense. You could protect it with Apostle's Blessing, whatever. That's one of the aspects that people don't always fully appreciate is just how good the Infect deck is at protecting their creatures. And Jace is a hell of a creature to protect.
Yeah, the thing is, if you just have any threat, right? You're like Glistener Elf or Blighted Agent, and it's alive, right? And then you just like flip a Jace. Just draw anything, you just kill them, right? Like Might of Old Kroza that's it. Like if your guy gets through, that's it. And it does so in such a cost-efficient manner.
But in the sideboard, what do you think of these Shaper Sanctuaries? This is a new one.
So Shaper Sanctuary it's a new card. It's for G from Ixalan enchantment. Whenever a creature you control becomes the target of a spell or an ability an opponent controls, you may draw a card. So if you have, say, Shaper Sanctuary and you're playing against a deck that has a lot of targeted removal, for example, Jeskai Control, for example, burn decks, whenever they're killing your creature, then you can draw a card. And that's when it becomes the target of the spell. So let's say I go to kill your Jace or I go to kill your Glistener Elf. If you've got a Blossoming Defense or a Vines of the Vastwood to save it, you got to draw a card. You might even draw... you can draw the card before the creature dies, right? Potentially, if it's on top of your library, save your guy, and this is a great option for winning grinding games, right? So one of the main strategies that is potentially successful against Infect is just to kill all of their creatures in a cost-efficient way in 1-for-1s. This is very good against that strategy.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yep.
And of course, there's good old Spellskite, right? I think like Shaper Sanctuary followed by Spellskite means that one of your guys will live, and typically you only need one guy to live. So
here's one for you that will probably warm your heart. Eric Simon's 11th place Affinity deck featured a Hazoret the Fervent.
Why would you think that would warm my heart?
With fire. It would warm your heart with fire. Like Hazoret the Fervent. I don't know.
I think it's super cute. If I were going to play Affinity, I would never do that.
Okay, what about Todd Anderson's use of Hazoret? Todd Anderson's 17th place Jund deck. He had one Hazoret the Fervent in his sideboard. And he's got one Thrun, one Hazoret the Fervent, kind of diversifying some of his, alternative extra victory conditions. What do you think about it here?
I think it's way better here than it is in the Affinity deck. So Todd's deck, like basically all Jund decks, is a progressive deck, but it can get kind of outmoded in the mid game, right? Like he's got these cards like Grim Lavamancer, Dark Confidant, Scavenging Ooze, and Tarmogoyf. He's 13 main deck creatures that cost 1 or 2, all of which are, I guess Tarmogoyf is a really efficient body, but everybody else is an advantage generating creature. And the way that Jund works is you have all these advantage generating creatures, and then you combine that with a bunch of like good cards, right? Whether they're Fatal Pushes or Kolaghan's Command or Lightning Bolts or Inquisitions, they're just like, all right, on this pile, I have these cards that are all good at the thing they're doing. Typically, they cost 1 mana, to do that thing, and you would love to draw them. And in this pile, you have these cards that make it so that the two piles are laced together, right? Like Dark Confidant is the perfect example of a card that bridges these, but everybody's doing it, right? Grim Lavamancer and Scavenging Ooze are going the opposite direction. Like, so you cast your Thoughtseize first, or you cast your Lightning Bolt first, and then you get paid later for having cast it already with these other creatures. But what ends up happening sometimes is you can be playing against these decks that are just way more powerful. They have like a more powerful thing going on than just a 1 or 2 casting us creature that generates an advantage, or some random 1-for-1 removal spell, or maybe you just, there's nothing for your Maelstrom Pulse to do. I think that if you're in one of those matchups, if you can get the opponent to tap down, you get enough good exchanges early, you just slap down Hazoret, and then they can taste 5.
So, are you so into it for would you go Christopher Begg's route? He's playing Jund with 2 main deck Hazoret the Fervents. Now, part of the way he supports these 2 main deck Hazoret the Fervents is that he's got a full 4 Liliana of the Veils. Because when you drop Liliana of the Veil on, if you play a Thoughtseize or an Inquisition on 1, and then you play a removal spell on 2, on turn 3, if you play a Liliana and minus, Hazoret attacks next turn.
So this is a tough one for me to answer. And the way I'd answer is, I don't know when I would want this configuration, right? First things first, to me, this is a deck that's got a 4-drop Hazoret, which is a card that's quite conditional, right? It's very powerful, but it's conditional. You need to have 4 mana. If you drew it early, you have to have 4 mana on demand. And it only works if you have been able to deploy your hand to get Hazoret low enough to attack. I think that is in diametric opposition to having 23 lands in the main deck. These two things don't go together. That you could have gone first. There's a pretty decent double-digit percentage of the time that you just stall on 3. Maybe you stall on 2, and it's not that you can't play 4 drops. It's just I don't think that this combination is particularly conducive versus other configurations that are a little less fancy. You notice that he's made room for cards like this by cutting Lightning Bolt. He only has 2 copies of Lightning Bolt. Todd only had 3. I don't know how I feel about that. I think Lightning Bolt's an awfully good, efficient card that you want to have.
Yeah, I think you're right. When you're playing Hazoret in a deck with 23 land, it's a little dicey if you can't play the land on time. But we do want to be careful because, decks in Standard get by with 23 land in Hazoret. Because remember, Hazoret doesn't have to be a guaranteed turn 4 play. Sometimes you want extra time to get your hand a little lower anyway. I think Hazoret's just kind of a very powerful card that makes a lot of sense to me in Modern. I don't know if Jund is the perfect home for it. Let me give you some examples. What do you think of Collective Brutality with Hazoret?
Oh, that's cool, because you can just drop your hand while doing a bunch of stuff that you want.
Yeah.
And Christopher's got 2 of them in his sideboard already.
Yeah, I think there's some appeal to Hazoret with Collective Brutality. That's kind of interesting. I generally just like Hazoret as a. What do you think of this? And this is a strategy after Paul Rietzel's heart. A Mardu deck with Lingering Souls and Hazoret. Like if you're playing sort of just like the Mardu deck that Paul and a bunch of those guys played in Modern a couple years ago, where you're playing Lightning Bolts and Dark Confidant and Thoughtseize and Inquisition and Lingering Souls and all that jazz, and then you've got Hazoret at the top of your curve. It's like such a powerful added dimension, particularly if you play against somebody who's relying on Lightning Bolt and Fatal Push. Think about playing a Grixis Death Shadow deck against somebody who just slams into you with Hazoret. So anyway, in addition to the Hazoret madness, all the Hazoret action, which, by the way, Madness and Hazoret's a hell of a combo, but wanted to kind of point to another graveyard deck, and I assume it doesn't have enough land to play Hazoret, but what do you think of Steve Rubin's Black-Red Hollow One deck? 4 Hollow Ones, 4 Bloodghast, 4 Flameblade Adept, 4 Gurmag Angler, for Street Wraith. He's only got 3 Flamewake Phoenix, but this is just a black-red, a very different kind of black-red graveyard aggro deck. Really capitalizing on the lack of graveyard hate.
Yeah,
he finished top 32, yeah.
Hollow One is really powerful if you've got it, in the right shell, right? So Hollow One is a relatively new card. It's from Amonkhet, right? And it's a 5 casting cost 4/4, but it has the ability. It costs 2 less to cast for each card you've cycled or discarded this turn. So if you're playing cards like Faithless Looting and Cathartic Reunion, you can discard a bunch of cards, bring down the cost of Hollow One. It's even possible to cast multiple Hollow Ones in the same turn for essentially no mana. At the same time,
yeah, if you just turn 1 Burning Inquiry draws 3 and discards 3. If you play Burning Inquiry, all your Hollow Ones are 0 cost 4/4s.
And you could just
on
drop
turn 1.
On turn 1. Yep. So, yeah, it's like a weird kind of Dark Ritual with Burning Inquiry.
Yeah. And if you use Faithless Looting, a Faithless Looting in a Street Wraith is a Hollow One on turn 1.
Yeah, so the deck's potentially super explosive, right? Like, in addition to playing, even multiple copies of Hollow One on the first turn, he could be dumping cards like Bloodghast that he can get back immediately, but also he's fueling his deck so that he can Gurmag Angler for cheap later, like turn 2 even.
Yeah, and it's actually really clever how many ways he has to get back the Phoenix with stuff like Gurmag Angler and Hollow One. But it's actually very reasonable for this deck to get back Flamewake Phoenix on the backs of a Flameblade Adept. Like Flameblade Adept, if you just cast Burning Inquiry or Cathartic Reunion or Faithless Looting, you're getting, it's very easy to get the Flameblade Adept up to big enough so that it can actually get a Flamewake Phoenix back.
Oh, cool. You know what my favorite card about this deck is? Big Game Hunter.
Oh yeah, Big Game Hunter is super sweet. There's a lot of cool stuff going on here, and I think the Big Game Hunter is the coolest. Being able to big game hunt, with Madness, is so sick.
Yeah.
It's just, it's a good removal spell anyway, but in many ways it's a, it's a 1-cost cantrip removal spell that also leaves behind a chump blocker.
Yeah, I love this deck because it is both very potentially explosive with these Hollow One and Gurmag Angler draws, but it also has so much synergy, and you're just doing pretty good stuff, right? It's still a Lightning Bolt deck, right? It's getting value out of Fiery Tempers and Big Game Hunters.
Yep. And so speaking of Lightning Bolt decks and coming full circle, one last deck I wanted to take a look at was Travis Purley's 4-color control deck, aka the Proof of Concept. He's playing a Jeskai deck that actually does, a Jeskai Search for Azcanta deck that actually does splash for Lingering Souls.
Yeah, so Travis's Proof of Concept deck makes a lot of concessions, though. He's only got 2 copies of Cryptic Command, and even though he's in Nahiri the Harbinger deck, he doesn't have any big creatures. He just has 4 Snapcaster Mages in the main deck.
Yeah, and he's playing a a lot of spice, like fancy stuff all over the place, right? Like he's got 1 Mystical Teachings, 1 Call Against Command, 1 Fatal Push, 1 Sphinx's Revelation. Because part of the way part of what he's doing with only 2 Cryptic Commands is that he's got a Sphinx's Revelation and a Mystical Teachings for other ways to get card advantage.
Yeah, the Teachings actually really works well with having a lot of 1-ofs and spice, though.
Definitely. Besides, Clean Living is Mystical Teachings to go get Is It Staticaster against a Humans deck.
I think the apex of Clean Living is using Mystical Teachings to go get a creature, and Is It Staticaster, as it were.
Yeah, of course, everybody's like Miss Vendilion Click is already a flash creature that people have the option of, but being able to get Is It Staticaster, that's just nice.
Yeah, I like it. All right, it sounds like there's a lot of stuff going on in Modern that's interesting and varied and quite powerful in some cases. Yeah,
for one, always it's Modern, but 2. I think recently we've seen even more diversification of what what all there is in Modern for people to be doing.
Yeah, I think Ixalan has given us a surprising number of contributors. From I think Search for Azcanta is the most prominent, along with Opt and what's that green enchantment?
To go find your Gaia's Cradle. Yeah, no, Shaper Sanctuary is pretty good.
Sanctuary, yeah,
that's decent.
Yeah, so I think that it's driven a lot, and obviously the Humans deck is largely driven by Ixalan, also, right? It's mana based, etc.
I think Opt and Unclaimed Territory definitely. They've been really making a lot of cards recently that are having an impact on Modern.
Yep. But for me, it's going to be Inspiring Vantage and Eidolon of the Great Revel, I think.
Dude, Inspiring Vantage is still new.
Yeah.
That's only, I guess it's more than a year old now. Jeez.
Yeah, I played it in the RPTQ last year, about this time.
Yeah. Well, awesome stuff, man. Good luck at the Invitational.
I will gladly take it.
We'll be rooting for you. Be tuning in. It's gonna be a good one.
So, I think by the time this goes up, the Invitational will not have started yet, but it will be impending when this goes up. So, anybody out there want to cheer for me, I will appreciate it. But if you want to find us, you can find us all kinds of places regardless.
Yeah, we're on Twitter, Facebook, YouTube, everything. Instagram, as always. You can just tweet at Flores. He'll respond to each and every one of you, I hope. Like all that. And of course, supporters on Patreon, we really appreciate being able to help us bring the program to y'all every week.
Yep.
And in particular,
we've shouted out to her before, but I just feel like I want to do it again. I want to shout out to Ashlyn Rose on Patreon. Just, content creator and fellow content creator, and just say thanks to not just Ashlyn, not just all of our patrons, but all the great content creators out there who help make this community so awesome.
Definitely. Thank you much, Ashlyn. And, of course, everybody else. It is dope just how many people are making stuff these days, and in such a variety that are doing stuff across the board, up and down, left, right, with all kinds of different aspects of the game and the culture to highlight.
We make decks. Ashlyn makes armor. Some people just make you smile. And, all of them are great.
Super dope. All right, man. Good luck. See you next week.
Night, Patrick.
Life didn't work so great. Tried to play dredge, it's a jailer hate. Ghostly prison waiting for my untapped phase. Your core trapped in amber stasis days. Lost a lot of friends, got left behind. Had to find a way not to lose my mind. Trapped in a